At Christmas, Grandma gave each of us a $4.8 million check. Dad sneered, "Don't be an idiot." Mom tore hers in half. My brother flicked his away like trash. I folded mine. 6 months later, Judge Reeves read her will. Nobody laughed. My dad said, "Don't be an idiot," to me at Christmas dinner while my grandmother sat 12 inches to his left and watched him say it. Thomas Mercer had just read the number on his check. $4.8 million. Printed on paper that felt heavier than ordinary paper. Thick stock, clean edges. The kind of paper chosen by someone who wanted the object itself to feel like what it represented. His name was centered in my grandmother's handwriting. Thomas Allen Mercer. The amount was spelled out in that long, formal banking language that makes money look almost ceremonial. He turned the check face down beside his plate, picked up his fork again, and looked across the cranberry sauce at me like I was 10 years old and had embarrassed him in front of guests. "Don't be an idiot, Caleb. It's fake." My mother, Claire, had already torn hers in half. Not dramatically. Efficiently. The way you tear a coupon you know you are never going to use. 2 uneven pieces sat beside her water glass, touching the stem like scraps from a receipt. My brother Derek barely read his. He saw the zeros, made the little scoffing sound he used when he wanted everyone to know he was too experienced to be impressed, and flicked the check under the table with his index finger. It disappeared beneath the white tablecloth. Nobody bent down. Tessa, Derek's fiancée of 10 years, did the strangest thing. She carried hers to the fireplace, held up her phone, recorded the gas flames for a few seconds, then came back and sat down like she had just contributed something interesting to the evening. I never knew whether she filmed the check burning or only filmed the fire because it matched the aesthetic of her Christmas stories. At the head of the table, Eleanor Ruth Mercer watched all of it. 80 years old. Cardinal sweater. Silver hair pinned back. No expression on her face. Just her family revealing itself, one reaction at a time. I looked at my check. Caleb Jonathan Mercer. My full name, written in my grandmother's hand with the same blue ink she used for birthday cards, grocery lists, and the notes she taped to containers of soup when she sent me home with too much food. On the back, near the endorsement line, she had written one sentence. "For the one who still comes on Saturdays." I read it twice. Across the table, Derek laughed at something Tessa showed him on her phone. My father kept eating like the matter had been settled. My mother pushed the torn halves of her check farther from her plate, as if even the pieces annoyed her. Grandma did not look hurt. That was what stayed with me. She looked finished. Like she had already expected the answer, but had still given us the dignity of providing it ourselves. I folded the check once along the long edge. Carefully. Not because I understood what was happening. Because she had handed it to me. I put it in my wallet. Then I looked at her. "Thank you, Grandma." Nobody else said it. Eleanor picked up her fork and went back to her sweet potatoes. "My name is Caleb Mercer." I was 32 years old then, working as a records conservation specialist at a regional historical archive in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the kind of job people pretend to respect until they realize it involves paper, climate control, and patience instead of status. My family had lived in Cedar Rapids for 3 generations, long enough for our last name to mean something in certain rooms and nothing in others. My father, Thomas Mercer, spent more than 30 years as a commercial litigation attorney. He built his reputation carefully, handshake by handshake, lunch by lunch, favor by favor, until his name sounded less like a person and more like an institution he expected the rest of us to protect. My mother, Claire, managed the family's image the way other people manage finances. Quietly. Constantly. With consequences. My brother Derek was 37, a regional sales director for a risk management firm, and the kind of man my parents could explain in one sentence at dinner parties. Successful. Confident. Good with people. Tessa Lane, his fiancée, had been around for 10 years, which meant she had all the entitlement of family and none of the restraint. Then there was me. The quiet son. The one who understood paper. My grandmother lived 6 blocks from my apartment in a white clapboard house on Ash Street, with a front porch that held 2 rocking chairs and a wind chime she had bought at a county fair before I was born. I went there on Saturdays. Not every other Saturday. Not when it was convenient. Saturdays. I had been doing it for 7 years, ever since I moved back to Cedar Rapids after graduate school, and realized the woman my family treated like a holiday fixture was one of the sharpest people I knew. Eleanor read everything. Municipal histories. Nebraska prairie novels. Old farm ledgers. Newspaper columns about interest rates. Architectural criticism from the 60s that she still got angry about if the author was lazy. She made coffee in a steel percolator older than my father and served it in mugs with cardinals on them. Sometimes I fixed things. A loose porch rail. A sticking cabinet. The wind chime after a storm bent one of the copper tubes. Mostly, though, we sat at her kitchen table and talked. About books. About records. About how cities remember themselves and families pretend they do not. I went because I wanted to. That is the only reason. Later, that would matter more than anyone understood. The bank opened at 9. I was there at 9:08. I remember the minute because I sat in my truck for 8 minutes with the check inside my jacket pocket, trying to decide which version of humiliation I preferred. Walking in with a fake $4.8 million check from my grandmother. Or walking out knowing my father had called a real gift stupid before the woman who gave it had finished eating dinner. Neither option felt clean. But records are records. You verify them. So I went inside. The branch was quiet, still smelling faintly of coffee and floor cleaner. A plastic wreath hung behind the teller counter. Someone had set out a bowl of peppermint candies near the deposit slips. The manager was Samuel Adeyemi. He had run that branch for 12 years and had known my family long enough to call my father Mr. Mercer in public and Thomas when he thought no one was listening. He remembered me. "Caleb," he said, standing from behind his desk. "Good to see you. What can I do for you?" I sat across from him and took the check out of my pocket. I need to verify something before I make any decisions. He smiled the polite, professional smile of a man who had handled thousands of awkward financial conversations. Then I slid the check across his desk. Samuel picked it up. His smile stopped. Not faded. Stopped. His eyes moved across the front, then to the signature, then to the bank seal in the lower corner. He did not say anything for several seconds. That silence told me more than any answer would have. Finally, he looked at me. "Caleb," he said carefully, "come with me." He stood, check in hand, and led me past the teller stations, past the copier room, into a small conference room at the back of the branch. No windows. 4 chairs. 1 table. A room built for privacy and bad news. Samuel closed the door behind us. Then he locked it. Samuel set the check on the table between us like it might make noise if he put it down too hard. Then he sat. Slowly. "Have you read what she wrote on the back?" he asked. I had. That morning, standing at my kitchen counter, before I drove over and tried to convince myself I was only being responsible. For the one who still comes on Saturdays. "Yes," I said. Samuel nodded once, as if that answered a question he had not asked out loud. Your grandmother came into this branch in November, he said. She spent almost 2 hours with me. I looked at the check. She had certain funds moved. She asked for 5 certified checks to be prepared. I handled the process personally. His voice stayed professional, but his face did not. His face belonged to a man who understood that money was not always the main thing happening in a room with money in it. I watched her sign them, he said. My throat went dry. So it's real. Samuel looked directly at me. As real as this table. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the building's heating system. My father's voice came back to me. Don't be an idiot. Samuel folded his hands. Caleb, I can confirm the instrument. I can confirm the funds. I can confirm your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. He paused. But this is only part of it. I looked up. I think you need to go see her. I drove straight to my grandmother's house without calling first. The truck felt too loud on the 6-block drive, like every stop sign and turn signal was delaying something I already knew had changed. Eleanor had the coffee on when I arrived. That told me 2 things. Samuel had called, and she had been expecting me. She opened the door before I knocked a second time, wearing the same cardinal sweater from Christmas dinner, her silver hair pinned back, her face calm in a way that made the entire morning feel planned. Not staged. Planned. She led me to the kitchen table with the green oilcloth cover and poured 2 cups from the old percolator. Then she sat across from me, both hands around her mug. Samuel called, she said. I figured. She looked at me for a long moment. Ask me what you need to know. I asked her everything. Eleanor answered like she had been waiting years for one of us to ask a real question. She told me about my grandfather, Arthur Mercer, who died when I was 8 and existed in my memory mostly as work boots by the back door and the smell of pipe tobacco on a wool coat. He had been a civil engineer. In 1974, he helped start a structural consulting firm with 2 other men and a drafting table in a rented office above a pharmacy. By the time he retired, the firm had municipal contracts, bridge inspections, courthouse renovations, and a reputation for telling clients what was true before telling them what was cheap. Arthur kept 38% of the company. When he died, that stake went to Eleanor. I didn't sell it, she said. She said it simply, like not selling had been the obvious choice. For 22 years, she kept receiving dividends, quarterly checks, then direct deposits, sometimes large, sometimes smaller, always documented. She told me about a financial columnist from Chicago named Martin Kessler, a man she started writing to in the late 80s after disagreeing with one of his pieces about municipal bonds. They exchanged letters for 16 years. Actual letters. She kept copies. He wasn't my advisor, she said. He was someone who made me explain my thinking. Then she told me Arthur had left her $350,000 in a separate account in 1999 because, in her words, your grandfather understood your father better than your father understood himself. I asked how much she had. Eleanor looked down at her coffee. About $38 million, she said. Give or take a bad market week. The kitchen went very quiet after she said the number. $38 million. A car passed outside on Ash Street. The wind chime moved once on the porch. I set my coffee down carefully because my hand needed something solid to finish doing. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked. Eleanor looked toward the window. Because no one asked. She said it without bitterness, which somehow made it worse. Your father asked once if he could review my investments, she said. Not because he wanted to understand my life. Because he wanted control of the part he could measure. I thought of Thomas at the table, turning the check over like it had insulted him. Derek asked me once what the house was worth, she continued. Tessa asked if the neighborhood was coming back. Your mother asked whether I had updated my beneficiaries, but she did it in that gentle voice people use when they want greed to sound like concern. Then she looked at me. You asked me what book I was reading. I did not know what to say to that. She wrapped both hands around the cardinal mug. I didn't give you all money on Christmas, she said. Not really. You gave us checks. I gave you a final chance. Her voice stayed level. A chance to ask why. A chance to say thank you. A chance to treat a gift like it came from a person instead of a punchline. I looked down at the table. They thought it was fake. No, she said. They hoped it was fake because that made their reaction safe. That landed harder than the money. Eleanor leaned back slightly. You didn't understand it either, she said. No. But you folded it carefully. I swallowed. And you thanked me. She nodded once. That was the whole test, Caleb. It took 1 hour and 49 minutes after I left my grandmother's kitchen for my family to stop calling the checks fake and start calling the money ours. Tessa texted first. Not one message. A chain. I didn't actually burn mine. I only filmed the fire. Can Eleanor reissue it? This is insane, Caleb. You don't need that much. We should all split it equally. That's what family does. I stared at the screen for a while before setting the phone face down. Derek left a voicemail 20 minutes later. I listened to it once. His voice had that sales floor edge, smooth on top and sharp underneath, the voice of a man trying to control a room that was no longer listening. You better not be playing games with this. That money belongs to the family. Call me back, you little snake. He hung up hard enough for the phone to catch the sound of his breathing first. My mother called twice. Soft crying. Careful pauses. The kind of grief she used when she wanted control to sound like pain. Caleb, I hope you understand what you're doing to this family. Not what Derek had done. Not what Dad had said. Not what she had torn in half with her own hands. What I was doing. That was when I understood the check had never been the test they failed. It was only the receipt. My father drove to Eleanor's house that afternoon. I know because she called me while he was still on the porch. He's here, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Are you safe? I'm fine, Caleb. I just wanted you to know. She told me later what happened. Thomas did not knock. He pounded. The way men pound on doors when they believe volume is a form of authority. Eleanor stood behind the narrow glass panel beside the front door and looked at him through it. Mother, he said, open the door. No. You gave away millions of dollars. I offered each of you $4.8 million. That is not the same thing. It is exactly the same thing, Thomas. You laughed at it. Claire tore it. Derek threw it under my table. Tessa treated it like a prop. He stared at her. You can reissue them. Eleanor turned the deadbolt. In all my life, I had never heard of her locking that door against her son. That day she did. Eleanor died in March. A stroke in her sleep, in the White House on Ash Street with the seasonal wreath still hanging on the front door and the wind chime moving softly in the morning air. The hospice nurse, Diane Park, called me at 6:16 a.m. She had been coming 3 days a week for the last month, and on 2 of those Saturdays she had sat at the kitchen table with us while Eleanor argued that most people misunderstood prairie novels because they confused quiet with emptiness. I drove over before sunrise had fully cleared the roofs. The percolator was still warm. That broke me more than I expected. I sat beside Eleanor for a while. Then I called my father. No answer. I called my mother. No answer. I texted Derek. Then Tessa. Nobody called back for 2 hours. The will was read 6 weeks later in the office of my grandmother's attorney, Lawrence Whitfield. Estate law. 31 years. A man with the careful stillness of someone who had watched families discover themselves in conference rooms for most of his adult life. His office was downtown, above a title company, with wood paneling on the walls and a window that looked out over the parking lot behind the courthouse. We sat around a long table. My father. My mother. Derek. Tessa. Me. For people who had destroyed or discarded their checks. And the one man who had folded his. Lawrence opened a folder, adjusted his glasses, and began reading. Most of it was ordinary legal language. The house on Ash Street. The contents. The porch windshield to Mrs. Alvarez next door because she had helped Eleanor bring in groceries after her knee surgery. The cardinal mugs to me. I looked down at the table when he read that part. I had expected the mugs. Somehow that made it worse. Then Lawrence reached the primary clause. He did not change his tone. That was what made the words hit harder. I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including the residence on Ash Street, the land, all investment accounts, and liquid assets, estimated at approximately $38.6 million net of Christmas distributions, to my grandson, Caleb Jonathan Mercer. My mother made a sound. Small. Sharp. My father turned his head toward Lawrence like he had misheard a ruling. Lawrence continued. Caleb is the one who still came on Saturdays. He came when there was nothing promised, nothing offered, and nothing to gain. He did not ask what I owned. He did not ask what he would receive. He brought coffee, fixed what was broken, argued with me about books, and treated my life as something still happening. Derek pushed back from the table. This is insane. Lawrence did not look at him. He is the only one who saw me without first looking for what I could give him. My father stood. Is this a joke? Lawrence finally raised his eyes. No, Thomas. It is a legal document. Please sit down. My father did not sit. For the first time in my life, I saw him realize that authority and control were not the same thing. And that day, he had neither. Lawrence gave my father 1 full minute to sit down. When he didn't, Lawrence continued anyway. There are additional documents. He opened a second folder. Not dramatic. Not slow. Just procedural, which somehow made it worse for everyone who had expected emotion to be enough. Your grandmother kept a fireproof safe in the hall closet of the second bedroom, he said. It was opened 2 days after her passing and inventoried as part of the estate process. My mother whispered, a safe? Like the object itself offended her. Lawrence removed the first stack of papers. 11 cognitive capacity evaluations, he said. He slid copies across the table. 1 for each year from 2013 through 2023. Performed by Dr. Miriam Holt, geriatric specialist, 24 years of practice. Each evaluation includes standardized testing, clinical notes, and professional conclusion. He paused. All 11 found Eleanor Mercer competent to manage her financial affairs and make independent legal decisions. My father stared at the pages. I watched his face tighten as the first escape route closed. Eleanor had known they would call her confused. So she had documented her clarity for 11 years. Lawrence reached into the folder again and placed a burgundy leather journal on the table. The spine was worn. The corners soft. I recognized it immediately. It had sat beside her chair in the living room for years, usually under a crossword book or a folded newspaper. 487 entries, Lawrence said. The room went still. Each entry corresponds to a Saturday visit from Caleb. I looked at the journal. My throat tightened in a way I did not expect and did not want anyone at that table to see. 487 Saturdays. Coffee. Books. Bad weather. Loose porch rails. The wind chime after the storm. Arguments about old maps and whether cities remember better than families do. She asked that I inform all of you that the journal will be submitted as supporting documentation in the event of any contest, Lawrence said. He looked at my father when he said contest. Not aggressively. Precisely. Eleanor documented the visits in her own handwriting. Dates, topics, observations, and her own reflections. My brother finally spoke. That doesn't prove anything. Lawrence looked at him. No, he said. It proves quite a lot. The lawsuit arrived 4 days later. Undue influence. That was the phrase they chose. My father, my mother, Derek, and Tessa claimed I had manipulated Eleanor Mercer into changing her will by cultivating a private relationship with her for personal gain. Cultivating. That word stayed with me. Like 7 years of Saturdays had been a strategy. Like coffee at her kitchen table had been a trap. Like fixing her porch rail and bringing her library books and listening to her argue about municipal records had all been part of some long con I had started before I knew there was anything to win. Tessa's name on the complaint bothered me more than I expected. Not because she had legal standing that made sense. Because she had eaten Eleanor's food for 10 years, sat at her Christmas table, accepted a $4.8 million check, treated it like a prop, then signed her name to a claim that I had taken something from her. I had to put my phone down and walk around my apartment twice before I could call Lawrence. He referred me to Patricia Cho. Estate litigation. 18 years. He said, when a will contest involves documentation this strong, Patricia is who you want. She reviewed the materials over 2 days and called me Sunday evening. Her voice was steady, direct, and completely unsentimental. I want to be clear with you, she said. Your grandmother prepared for this. I know. No, Patricia said. I mean, she really prepared. The capacity evaluations are strong. The journal is stronger. I looked at the box of copied documents on my kitchen table. Why? Because undue influence requires them to show that Eleanor's decision reflected your will instead of hers. Isolation, dependence, manipulation, pressure. None of those words belong to my Saturdays with her. Patricia continued. The journal documents independent reflection over 7 years. Dates, ordinary conversations, emotional context, observations in Eleanor's own handwriting. It does not read like a woman being managed. It reads like a woman paying attention. I sat down slowly. What do I need to do? Show up, Patricia said. Tell the truth. Let the documentation do what Eleanor built it to do. The courthouse had marble floors. I remember that more clearly than I remember what tie my father wore or where Derek sat. Footsteps sounded different on marble, sharper, less forgiving, like the building had been designed to make every movement part of the record. The hearing lasted 2 hours. Patricia Cho presented the will first. Then the 11 cognitive capacity evaluations. Then the journal. Lawrence Whitfield read 7 entries aloud as the documenting attorney. March 14, 2015. August 6, 2017. November 9, 2019. Each one ordinary. Coffee too strong. Caleb tightened the loose hinge on the pantry door. Talked about river maps. Argued about whether old newspapers preserve truth or just preserve what powerful people needed printed. The opposing attorney, Gerald Park, stood and tried to make my Saturdays sound sinister. Pattern of influence. Systematic access. Dependency. Deliberate emotional positioning. He was competent. I could tell that. He was doing the best he could with material that did not want to become his argument. Because the journal kept answering him. 487 entries in Eleanor's handwriting. Books. Weather. Coffee. Old records. A porch rail. A grandson showing up because he wanted to. Not pressure. Not isolation. Presence. Judge Patricia Reeves took 40 minutes. Not long enough for hope. Long enough for people like my father to start mistaking delay for possibility. When she returned, she upheld the will. Contest dismissed. Plaintiffs to bear attorney fees. No speech. No moral lecture. Just a ruling. I sat there with my hands in my lap, waiting for my body to shake. It didn't. That surprised me. I only felt still. Clear. Like something I had been bracing against for months had finally landed, and I had survived the weight of it. The marble hallway came after. I was walking toward the exit with Patricia beside me, her case folder tucked under one arm, when I heard the courtroom door open behind us. Fast. Hard. My father's footsteps followed. I knew the sound before I turned. Thomas Mercer always walked like the floor had agreed to support him personally. Caleb. I kept walking. Not because I was afraid of him. Because there are moments when stopping gives someone more dignity than they have earned. He caught up to us in the widest part of the hallway, beneath the high ceiling where every sound carried farther than it should have. There was a woman near the wall about 20 feet away. Press badge. Notepad. Pen already in her hand. I noticed her the way you notice background details in a room full of stress. Not important yet. Not until they become the entire point. My father stepped in front of me. His face was red, but his voice was controlled for the first 3 words. You did this. I looked at him. No. That was all. His control broke. Not loudly at first. Then completely. You are the worst son I have ever had. The marble took the sentence. It lifted it off his mouth and carried it down the hallway, clean and sharp, every word intact. Worst son. Ever had. Patricia went still beside me. The woman with the press badge looked up. My father realized it 1 second too late. I watched the realization hit him, and for the first time, I did not feel responsible for saving him from the consequences of his own mouth. I said nothing. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, the reporter said, Mr. Mercer, I'm with the Gazette. Do you have a moment? The article ran on Tuesday. Page 2. Local section. The reporter's name was Janet Marsh, 12 years with the Gazette, courthouse beat long enough to know the difference between background noise and a quote worth printing. The headline was about the will contest. The body was careful. Documented estate dispute. Unusually thorough capacity records. A handwritten journal spanning 7 years of visits. Patricia Cho was quoted once. Lawrence Whitfield was quoted once. Both sounded exactly like attorneys sound when they want no sentence to become a problem later. Then came the hallway quote. Attributed by name. Thomas Mercer, local commercial litigation attorney, reportedly told his son after the ruling, "You are the worst son I have ever had." They pulled that sentence out beside the article in larger type. My father had spent more than 30 years building a public version of himself. Measured, professional, principled, family-oriented when useful. He had built it handshake by handshake, client lunch by client lunch, quote by quote in charity newsletters and bar association profiles. One marble hallway gave the city a cleaner document. Not the version of Thomas Mercer he had edited for public consumption. The real one. For once, I did not have to explain him to anyone. 6 months later, I still lived in the same apartment. Same narrow kitchen. Same radiator that knocked at night when the temperature dropped. Same view of the alley behind the building where delivery trucks backed in too early and made the whole place vibrate. I still worked at the archive. My title changed a little. My salary changed less than people would assume. The real difference was that I funded a preservation initiative for regional records that had been sitting in cardboard boxes in basements, county offices, church storage rooms, and back shelves where history goes when nobody has a budget for it. Flood-damaged ledgers. Farm maps. Letters from closed schools. Old city planning documents. Things that would have disappeared quietly if someone had not decided they were worth keeping. That felt like something Eleanor would have understood. The house on Ash Street had a new wreath on the door by September. I put it there myself when the air started changing and the maples along the block went red at the edges. The wind chime was still on the porch. I repaired the cord again after a storm. The percolator was in my kitchen now, sitting on the counter where I could see it from the table. I had not spoken to my father since the courthouse. My mother sent a card in June. No letter. No apology. Just a printed message about healing and her name signed at the bottom. Derek stayed quiet. Tessa disappeared from social media, which I learned from someone else and did not investigate. Patricia handled the attorney fee order. The plaintiffs paid. I did not ask the final number. It was not money I needed to enjoy. It was a consequence they had chosen. Last Saturday, I sat at my kitchen table with the percolator ticking behind me and a book about the Nebraska prairie open beside my coffee. The same book Eleanor and I had argued about years earlier. She said people misunderstood prairie stories because they thought quiet meant empty. I think about that more now. About quiet. About records. About the difference between someone saying a thing loudly and someone writing the truth carefully enough that it survives them. 487 entries. All in her handwriting. All dated. All waiting in a burgundy leather journal inside a fireproof safe for the day someone would try to turn love into manipulation because the alternative made them look too small. My father left a sentence in a marble hallway. My grandmother left 7 years of proof. His sentence traveled fast. Hers lasted longer. That is what records do. They sit quietly until the room needs them. Then they outlive everyone who thought volume was the same thing as truth.